Because with the Lord there is mercy and fullness of redemption. Israel indeed he will redeem from all its iniquity.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming today. I decided to do this talk because I'm one of the lucky people who is going to be going on the pilgrimage to the Holy Land that our church is making this spring. And of course, the Holy Land is the bone of contention for the Crusades. However, as we're going to find out today, the Crusades actually happened in several widely separated areas of the world, and in a way, the crusading movement isn't even over today. It's still affecting the world that we have right now. But the immediate background of the Crusades is, to give you some idea, the Prophet Muhammad died in the year 632 AD. By the early 8th century, so you're talking only slightly more than 100 years, Spain, North Africa, Syria, and Palestine had all been lost to the Muslims. And by the mid-11th century, the Seljuk Turks had converted to Islam, and they were rapidly establishing an empire in the Middle East. So we're talking about almost 1,000 years ago. Most of the losses came from the Byzantine Empire. And in 1071, the Turks captured the Byzantine Emperor Romanus Diogenes at the Battle of Manzikert. Now, Manzikert is in Anatolia, which is the part of Turkey that is on the other side of the Bosphorus from Constantinople. Needless to say, this got everybody's attention in the West. And this is the point at which the crusading movement can be said to have officially started. Now, we think of the Crusades in terms of First Crusade, Second Crusade, Third Crusade. And the reason we think that is that there were some very large expeditions that took place periodically, manned by some of the crowned heads of Europe, very famous people in history like Richard the Lionhearted, King of England. However, as a matter of fact, the Crusades were less a series of events than they were a movement or a concept. And as a matter of fact, there was just a constant flow of men and material back and forth to the Holy Land for several hundred years, even after Jerusalem fell to the Turks finally for the last time. So if I were going to define crusade, I would say something like, it's a holy war fought to regain Christian property or to defend the church and or Christian people, believed to be authorized directly by Christ through the agency of his representative on earth, which is the Pope. Interestingly, crusades were originally defined as in terms of a pilgrimage, and the concept of the rights and privileges of a crusader were based on the rights and privileges of somebody going on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And in the Middle Ages, if you went on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, your property was protected, such that no one could come and take over your castle, your farm, whatever it was. You didn't have to pay interest on your debt. And you couldn't be prosecuted for crime. And in fact, people were often sent on pilgrimage to do penance for crimes that they had committed. And so these privileges were then transferred over to the people who went on crusade. The difference was they weren't just going to visit the places in the Holy Land to pray, to do penance or something like that. They were going to fight to recover those holy places from the Turks. Now, what we think of as the First Crusade was called in the year 1095 by Pope Urban II. In March of that year, the Pope and the clergy of the Latin Church were assembled for a council at Piacenza in Italy, and they heard an appeal from the Byzantine Emperor Alexius for help against the Turks. And on November 27th, Pope Urban VII formally called the First Crusade at the Council of Clermont, which is also in France. And we do not have a formal crusading proclamation or crusading bull for this crusade, but various chroniclers took down or received a report of what he said, and I'll read you one of them. Quote, "The Turks and Persians, Arabs and Saracens have overcome Antioch and Nicaea and Jerusalem itself, which is glorified by Christ's sepulchre, and many other cities peopled by Christians. Now they send out their mighty armies into the empire of the Greeks and already dominate Palestine and Syria, which they have conquered. They have destroyed churches and slaughtered Christians like sheep. The infidels have made stables for their beasts in the churches where masses used to be celebrated by the faithful, and have established their superstitious and heathen practices, to our shame driving Christian worship from the house dedicated to God. The properties given for the livelihood of holy men and the estates of magnates assigned for the support of the poor have fallen under pagan tyranny, and the Lord who have annexed them cruelly misused. They have carried off many prisoners into exile in distant lands, and binding them with thongs, have forced them to submit to the yoke and to cultivate the fields laboriously, dragging the plows like oxen, and to undergo other cruel labors more fitting for beasts than for men. As our brothers sweat at such tasks, they lash them with whips, prick them with goads, and subject them to terrible sufferings in countless ways." Very inflammatory rhetoric, and it served to unite Europe. And
was it true?
I think this is exaggerated, but it's basically true. And it was preventing people from going to the holy places that they wanted to see, just as we want to see them today. Now, some historians will tell you that this is really just European expansionism. This is, the first wave of people going out to conquer the rest of the world, and that, ultimately it's going to go on. It's the basis for conquering the new world. And the argument kind of goes something like this. In the very early Middle Ages, the custom of inheritance was that a father would divide his property between his 3 or 4 sons, whatever he had. Well, it doesn't take a mathematical genius to figure out that after a couple of generations, the estates are now too small to support a family. And they're also too small to provide the military service that is owed to the king. So then the custom became primogeniture, which means everything goes to the first son. So that left a whole lot of landless younger sons who were just looking for something to do. And the crusade was then a great way to go see if you can find some new property for yourself somewhere else. Now, there's a few problems with that argument. And one of the big ones is that it's expensive to be a knight and go on crusade. The first issue is your horse. This is not, the cowboy on his American quarter horse style animal riding off to join the U.S. cavalry. A medieval war horse is more like one of the Budweiser Clydesdales, only it's vicious because it is trained specifically to fight in battle by trampling people with its front feet. So, ideally, you don't want to ride this thing. You want to lead it and have another smaller, more comfortable horse to ride as you're traveling. You're also going to wear about 50 pounds of chainmail armor that you can't get into by yourself. So you need a squire. You need something for him to ride. And then on top of that, you need food and supplies for yourself and your animals, so you need a pack horse. And you also need ready cash because you cannot carry enough food to sustain yourself while you travel from, say, England or northern France all the way to the Holy Land fight for who knows how long, and then try to make your way back. So you need